Hi, this is Leland Chee, creative executive at Lucasfilm, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Zehr. This is the podcast you're looking for.
We've been here for 7 weeks, and there's no one here, and if we were going to find something, we probably would have found it by now.
A force called here.
I think they're witches.
Night Sisters.
We do not have all the information. Besides, Night Sisters don't raise younglings, let alone train them.
You saw what they were capable of.
You can feel the twins are not safe.
They say that we have interfered too much already.
Will they let us come home at least?
I warned you not to interfere. I warned both of you,
I wanted the twins to be safe.
with no thought of the consequences.
This is Ashley Eckstein, Ahsoka Tano from Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Coffee with Kenobi. I am your host, Dan Zehr. Very excited to talk about Star Wars with you. This week, we are talking about the Acolyte's penultimate episode. The 7th episode of Season 1 is called Choice, and it is my choice, nay, my honor, my privilege, to share this first season of the Acolyte by breaking it down with the one and only James Burns of Jedi News. James, welcome as always to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me again. It seems like only a few days ago that we were talking about episode 6, and here we are with episode 7, and then the show's going to be done in a week.
Isn't that wild? I'm having sort of a very conflicted feelings on it. I'm looking forward to breaking that down with you. As always, I learn from you and appreciate the opportunity to bounce this off you. This is the penultimate episode, the second to last one in season 1. So as we start each one, please give me one word and overall thoughts on the episode. And by the way, before it started, James said, "So what do you think?" And I said, "Well, how about we save for the show?" And James had this big giggly look on his face full of mischief and said, "Okay, so here we go."
Finally. That's my word, because after 7 episodes, we finally got to understand what the big mystery was, what's been going on for the last 16 years, what have Soul and everybody been keeping stum on. We now know the big reveal. And I'm a bit let down. I'm a bit deflated, because was it really that much of a big deal?
Okay, well, we'll see. We'll talk about it. And my word is fascinating. Okay. I find this episode to be fascinating for conflicting reasons, and I think that's sort of appropriate. I think there are several pearls in this one, more so than in other episodes of this season, and quite a few moments of head scratching that I'm not sure about, and I'm guessing you may have similar thoughts. So let's go ahead and kind of split this thing up. We'll call it a 2 cup of coffee show. Just figure that out after 11 years of the show. Mm-hmm. The first half, we'll talk about the things that add a little bit of sugar to our coffee or tea, okay, and made us
vanilla syrup.
Sure, if that sweetens it up for you, then absolutely. And I've had the privilege of having dinner with James in London with his lovely wife, and I know he is quite a connoisseur of the hot beverage.
Well, a cup of tea, nice cup of tea, but coffee's good as well. Coffee definitely has its place.
Indeed, it does. So let's kick it off. Tell me something that added a little sugar to your coffee about the episode choice. Something that really worked for you or fascinated you.
Yeah, look, I was thrilled that we finally got the answers to what we'd all been waiting to hear. You know, the minute we had the flashback episode, which was the 3rd episode of the show, mm-hmm, we knew there was something more to come. We saw, things in that episode that didn't really make sense. And it was alluded to the last few scenes of the last episode when Soul is talking to May. And he's, leaning over her, as we discussed in great detail last week. And he says, I'm going to tell you. And finally, we get to hear. And Soul was responsible for killing one of May's mothers, or maybe both of May's mothers in a roundabout way, but mm-hmm, definitely sort of. It was really interesting. It was interesting that you've got 4 Jedi out on a mission in space, and they've gone to this particular planet, which they believe for 100 years hasn't been growing anything. Nothing's happening there because of a hyperspace leak or something. Wasn't quite sure.
Oh, I think that's from the High Republic book.
Oh, of course it is. Of course it is. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right.
So that was cool.
Yeah, so that was nice. That was really, really nice to have that tie-in, and loads more tie-ins like that, please. And then we learned about the Virgins, and they kept talking about the Virgins. And I liked Torben was great in the way that he was asking questions, and he was frustrated that he was on this planet doing the same thing day after day. And he was like a little petulant schoolchild, because even though he was being told this stuff, he wasn't accepting of it. But it was interesting and nice to see that relationship, because we've seen that relationship before, whether it's been with Anakin and Ahsoka or with Obi-Wan and Anakin. We've seen that sort of relationship, and it reminded me a little bit of that.
And yet you could understand Torben's frustration, not only just as an adolescent, but just as someone who's like, look, I'm putting grass in this blender. Everybody's walking around with metal detectors like they're on the beach in the late 70s looking for coins. We got the iPad out. We're looking for stuff. We're trying to figure out what the Virgins is. And they explain the Virgins as a concentration of force energy that is surrounded around a location.
Mm-hmm.
And then they follow that up with the Virgins could create life like we have seen on this planet. Because as you mentioned, because of the hyperspace problem, there wasn't life, and now there is, and it's a power that they want to be able to study. So Soul actually says it's a noble mission.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've seen Virgins before. Anakin's birth was a Virgins in the Force.
Yep.
So I don't believe that the idea of a dyad in the Force is a Virgins. I don't think they use the word Virgins when talking about the dyad in Episode 9, do they?
Don't think so, no.
I don't think so either. I enjoyed that aspect of it as well, because at least it's something that's somewhat familiar.
Yep.
That kind of builds upon what we already know. Now, let's be really clear on something. The Force is fake. Okay, thank you. I just wanted everybody to know that. But in all seriousness, the Force is part of a growing mythology. Star Wars is not a stagnant mythology. Star Wars is something that was created in it was created earlier than 1977, but it debuted in 1977. And it's something that is constantly being grown and fed. If you've ever made sourdough bread, you start with this yeast, right? And it's like a living organism, and you have to feed it, right? And you have to feed it. And you have to take care of it. And then you use part of that to build this beautiful slice of bread. The Acolyte is a beautiful slice of bread. You may not like the taste of it.
Yep.
But it is something that is being fed. Star Wars is an active mythology. It's growing. So there will be aspects of it that maybe not work for us, that we can't digest as well, to continue the food metaphor. But I'm pretty proud of this. I just made it up on the fly. But it is something that is being nurtured. So this is where the Force is right now. At least it was 100 years ago, before the events of the Phantom Menace. I really think that's kind of a cool concept.
Mm-hmm. And I also like, when they were investigating the plants and analyzing them, I'm a firm believer, if maybe controversial, if you go back to the Old Testament, it says in there that for every disease there is a cure. There is a cure available to us in nature, and we just have to go and find it. So I liked
pretty cool
that. Yeah, I like the fact that they were looking at the vegetation, and they were experimenting with it and trying to analyze what was there.
It was about life.
Yeah, and I like that. I actually really, really liked that.
Me too. A Force is an energy field created by all living things. So this all builds upon the mythology of the Star Wars galaxy. My first one that I want to talk about I understand now why Soul has such an aversion to himself, that he is hidden for Soul. And this is a pretty complicated thing. So he murders the mother. And the first time I watched him, like, wait, why is he stabbing her? What the heck? He just killed her. No wonder he feels like such a bad person, because that was a terrible thing to do. And I watched it a second time, and I realized when she is turning into this black smoke, which of course, if you're dealing with witches, would make you concerned. It was also affecting May, because May was turning into that as well.
Yep.
And then when she starts to disappear, he looks to his left, and whether he's looking at Torben and where he's going to be, infested again, or whether he sees May starting to disappear, he reacts defensively and aggressively, and he stabs. But he's like a preemptive strike. Before the nuclear bomb hits, I'm going to fire a nuclear bomb of my own. Is that the Jedi way? I don't know. My instinct is to say no, it's not. Well, and I kept thinking, what he was being defensive, but my thinking was, what would Obi-Wan do in that situation? What would Ahsoka do in that situation? What would Anakin Skywalker do in that situation? They probably all react a little bit differently, and that is something I think is quite rich and ripe for discussion. So I'm not really sure how to feel about that, but that's pretty frightening. But then I think what makes it worse. Well, there are a couple things. Let's just talk about all the soul things.
Yeah, go for it.
And I think this is all part of the sugar that we can add, because this adds to the discourse. This adds to the rhetoric of the Star Wars mythology as a whole. The at the end, when we see Osha and May both on bridges, very symbolic, and he's trying to hold them both up. He can't do it. And then this gut reaction, he turns and he only saves Osha and he lets May fall. Now, he feels terrible about it. He feels awful about it. There's no question about that. The performance is quite engrossing. So he saves Osha. And so there's that. And then at the end, Indara tells him, we're going to tell the truth. And the truth ends up being a complete lie, which Soul goes along with. So there are three things that happen that really eat at his soul, and he goes along with them. Now, that's actually going to lead to something that I find challenging, but I want to see what you thought about that.
Well, up until that point, Indira has always appeared to tell the Jedi Council everything. And whenever there was a decision to be made, she would go to the Jedi Council and she would ask their opinion before enacting on something.
Right.
And then it appears in that split second that she throws all that away and she tells a lie.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Why did she spin 360 degrees at that particular point when they could have taken a step back and they could have said everything went really, really wrong and this is what happened, and they probably could have explained it, but they didn't do that.
No.
They decided to cover the whole thing up. And I'm not quite sure why, because I appreciate that a lot of people died and didn't necessarily need to die, but I don't think that they realized that by breaking the spell that was on Kel Naka would end up killing the whole coven. I don't think that was something they were aware of, because potentially they wouldn't have done it. So I think they could have gone back to the Jedi Council and they could have explained exactly what happened. My biggest issue was that Torbin went off as a maverick because he felt that he wanted to deal with the situation and they couldn't, or she couldn't control her own Padawan. So to me, that's more of an issue, because had she have controlled him, the situation may never have got out of hand in the way that it did. But I'm knowing some of the adventures that we've seen Anakin and Ahsoka on during the Clone Wars that potentially are much graver than that. They still shared those stories with the powers that be. So what was so significant about this one that Indira decided on her own that they weren't going to talk about it anymore? And then the others just had to buy into that.
So Indara is a complicated character. She's not complex. I think she's pretty direct on who she is. I don't know that she changes at all, but she doesn't have to. Not every character is going to be multifaceted. She's complicated because she seems like there's a lot of talk about gray Jedi. There's no official gray Jedi in Star Wars. That's a fan thing. Okay. But in this, Indara constantly is doing things that make you uncomfortable as someone who understands, people who've grown up with the Jedi, right? Because she's physical. Like, she puts her hands on Soul, like at the end of the episode, to kind of hold him back because she's frustrated. She makes some interesting choices. It certainly appears at the end, and I'm not sure what happened. I don't know that anyone really knows what happened except for the creators of the series. When she purges Kel Naka of this dark infestation that is causing him to fight. And by the way, we were worried. You and I were worried. We got to see a Wookiee fight as a Jedi, and that was awesome. That was incredibly awesome. So we got to say that. Really
Huge
fun.
tick. Yeah.
Yes. But when she purges, all of a sudden, all these women, do they die or do they pass out? Because if they die, if Indara knew it, that's mass murder, and she's dark side all the way. I don't think she knew. I don't know. And I'm actually very comfortable with the ambiguity. I don't think it's really clear. I don't even know that they necessarily died, but they seem to have. Maybe she forced the black toxic infestation back where it came from, and it hit them all and knocked them out. And maybe they couldn't handle it like a Wookiee Jedi could handle it. I don't know. What do you think?
But that explains why in the original flashback in episode 3, we didn't see them burnt. We didn't see their bodies discarded in that way, which is what you and I surmised at the time. Mm-hmm. But here we are, and there's fire engulfing their home. And when the Jedi leave, I would imagine the fire's going to carry on. So the fire would eventually engulf them. Although we know that May got out. Did May manage to bring anybody else with her? We don't know that yet. Or maybe we won't even find that out in this first series.
And stone is flammable, but that's a separate thing. Okay, so listen. Yeah. Then the other interesting aspect. Actually, go. You have another. What do you want to say about Sol's choice to save Osha? My question is, why does he have? Well, actually, I'll save that for. I'll save that for after.
Yeah, I mean, look, Sol definitely has an affinity for Osha. We're not quite sure what it is, but pretty much from the first time he meets her, there's a bond there. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's because she's saying quite openly, "I want to go with them. I want to be tested." Mm-hmm. She wants to know more, and we had that brief piece of dialogue between Indara and Sol, where she says, "Look, I've got a Padawan. You don't." And maybe, the first time he gets an opportunity potentially to latch onto a Padawan, he's like, well, I'm taking that. That's mine. I'm going to have her as my Padawan. So
which is weird.
It is weird, but maybe that's what he feels. He maybe he just feels that he isn't complete. A Jedi will, as we've learnt, Jedi take on many apprentices during their time, and here he is. He hasn't yet taken anybody on. So with her teasing him about that, when there's an opportunity to take on a Padawan, I think he jumps to it. And maybe that's why there's that affinity there. And when it comes to saving one or the other, he's looking out for himself. He thinks, well, if I save her, she can become my Padawan. I can deal with that.
Which is incredibly selfish.
Yes.
Right? And me driven instead of they driven. And George has said, we've seen George say, look, the Jedi, the light side are selfless. The Sith, the dark side are selfish. So Sol, like Indara, is a very complicated character in the fact that they do not follow the traditional Jedi path. So remind me to talk about that when we get to when our sugar runs out.
Yeah, if you've got a choice, though, of you're going to save the good person or the bad person, if you're a Jedi, you're probably going to choose the good person. Because
sure, but is it fair to say, like, a 10-year-old is bad? Well, how much has he... But what has he seen? He hasn't seen anything.
We don't... obviously, we saw the trial, and she faked the whole trial, so we know that happened. Mm-hmm. We can see that she's got more strength, and she appears to be stronger in the dark side, and Sol's seen some of that. Sol's seen that with his own eyes. Mm-hmm. So maybe he feels that there's no affinity there. I can't do anything for her or with her, so I'm going to go for maybe the easy option, which is Osha.
Which is a horrible thing.
It is.
He's even worse of I never thought of that. He's even worse of a person than I realize if that's the case. Because if he sees her deny a test because she wants to stay home with her family, I don't think that's bad. I think that's just being attached to your family. And maybe that's part of the, they're too old, which I am glad they addressed. I'm sure you're too. I'm glad they addressed why are they going to train, what are they going to train these two or Osha? Because they're too old for the training. Is what Yoda says. That's why I denied Anakin, right? In Phantom Menace.
Correct. Which is good. So we did get a lot of answers here. And I appreciate the fact that we got all these answers. I just wish that we'd got them earlier on in the series, because I think the series would have flowed better having some of this information.
Well, this also explains why they considered this series a mystery. I still don't consider this a mystery series. I think it's just it's a stylistic choice, an unconventional choice of how you want to tell a story. And I'm fine with that. If this is how you want to tell your story, if you're consistent with the rules you have set for yourself, then that's okay. It can be challenging, but that's, for me, that's okay. Although I completely see what you're talking about. I also want to talk about the fact that they talk about Night Sisters.
Yes.
We hear the word Force Cult, which to my thinking, I've never heard that before. Have you?
No,
Force Cult?
no, and I don't like it.
Yeah, tell me why.
I just don't think it really fits in Star Wars as we know it today. I think we've got the covens of witches. We've seen that. We've seen that in Clone Wars. We've seen the Night Sisters. We've seen how that interacts with Maul and some of the other things that have gone on over the past 25 years or so. And that all sort of fits, but we've never really had any cults as such.
Well, yeah, cult by definition is like a very dangerous fanaticism.
Yeah.
It doesn't involve any free thinking, but it's more like obsessed, dangerously so, with a particular idea, concept, philosophy, mindset, whatever. So if they are going to use that term, which does make me bristle too, but just because the word cult is a scary word. It's a scary word in the real world. But if they're going to call it a cult and they're painting it as negatively, then I don't know what else you would call it. It makes me uneasy. But based on what we've seen about these women, the way they act, well, it's not even fair. Let's talk about. So we've got Mother. Was it Anasaya?
Yes,
she's lovely, and she truly appears to have good intentions. Now, the other mother we knew was aggressive, but we see in this that she is trying to teach May, at least, the dark side, or she's using dark side techniques. She wants May to be angry.
Yes.
She's the one who's constantly attacking them, trying to get them to use the Force to block her. And she seems to enjoy that. She wants to fight. What's her name? I wrote it down.
Yeah. Her name is Mother Coral.
Coral. Yeah. When you write down a name, it helps to have the paper with you. And I don't have it in the studio. So how about that? Good for me.
It's all good.
It's all good. So I'm going to talk a lot about her in the second half of the show, but I appreciate that they showed her the way that they did, because we started to see, it's not that she's just aggressive, but she's got some major anger issues, and it starts to kind of connect why May, who may have responded more to Mother Cora, that's why she ends up having a bit more of a dark side, because it's been encouraged, which is a pretty scary thing, terrible thing to do as a parent. But you see where she gets it.
Yeah, very much so. And it's we often talk about in parenting, good cop, bad cop. But this seems to go to a whole other extreme. You've got somebody who seems to be really placid and really kind, and then you've got the other parent who is so aggressive. Two completely different beings. Although we did see with the other mother, when she starts using the dark magic, when the Jedi came for that second time uninvited, she turned the dark magic on first, although it was Coriel who'd got all of the others together and given them weapons and said that we have to attack. So I found that interesting. I don't know why they felt the Jedi was such a threat. Maybe Coriel felt because they were going to potentially take the children away.
And threaten their way of life.
Correct. But it was
colonialism.
Yeah, I guess so.
I do also want to point out that I really like Torben. I didn't really care for him up until this episode, but I found him cool. I found him interesting. The fact that he ran on the speeder bike and raced off seemed a little impetuous and rash, and I didn't know if that quite made sense to me, but that's what they did, and I went with it. And I really liked him. I liked his character. I liked that he just wanted to be home, and he felt like this was a waste of time. And his brashness does track with some. I mean, I'm a high school teacher, so I've seen impetuous behavior before.
Of course.
So I can kind of see that, and I welcomed him. Like I wept more for what happened to him in episode 2 because of this episode.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. And it was nice to understand how he got those scars that we talked about previously as well.
Mm-hmm.
We understand that now. I enjoyed all of that. I thought that was nice getting to know the characters, which is something that we've been lacking in this series and something we've commented on as well, that we didn't have a lot of empathy for some of the characters because we didn't understand them. At least now we do. And I just, I know I've said it a couple of times, but I just feel that if the story had been told the other way round, so we'd got this exposition first, and then we see May going to the village, going after Indara, that also would have made a lot of sense because we would have understood why she was doing it.
Sure.
So I'm not sure. I'm not sure how best to tell a story like this.
Well, I love that you're saying that, and it could be that we could have like an Acolyte machete order. What if we told people, hey, watch episode 3 and then 7, and then 1, 2, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
And then see how it works through that. I think that's a fascinating story experiment, and I think it's a cool idea, James.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, what I'd do is I'd take episode 3 and episode 7 and cut them apart so they actually flow into one cohesive story.
Because there's some overlap. I don't know if they're the exact same scenes, but...
Yeah. I've only seen episode 7 a couple of times so far. I mean, it was only out today, but it would be interesting to see that. And then, as you say, to go straight into episode 1 again would be really interesting to see how different it would be or feel.
It might be interesting to give that experiment. All right. So do you have any other thing sugary related that you'd like to discuss? I'm pretty good. I'm ready to jump into the...
just positives. Music was amazing, as always. I loved some of the choreography. Some of the fighting scenes were done really, really well. Some of the CGI I thought was a little bit not up to...
With the speeder bikes?
Yeah, it wasn't up to the sort of standard that I would have expected from ILM. But, we don't know how quickly or not they've had to turn these things around. So, is what it is.
Right, agree. And yes, the fight, especially with Kalnak, was tremendously cool.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Yeah, so if you're someone who would rather just hear about the things that work for us, this will be a wonderful time to pause or to maybe end the show. But if you want to stick with us now, we're going to go to the things, and I wish I'd done this from the beginning, but I think it's going to work. I think it's good. Now let's talk about the things that maybe made our coffee or our hot tea or our beverage taste a little bit more sour or unappetizing, things that didn't work for us. And I have things I need to get off my chest, and I'm sure you do as well.
You go first this time.
Okay. So the first thing I want to talk about is Mother Cora. I don't understand. There's something that doesn't make sense to me, and it's tied into that scene, which is a great, powerful, gasp scene. Your jaw drops. But she's clearly shown this episode she's so aggressive and very angry, right? And that she is ready to fight. Then she watches her wife, I'm assuming it's her wife, be murdered in front of her eyes. And she doesn't attack instantly. She pauses, she looks down. It doesn't look like she's grieving. She kind of looks like she's just sitting there waiting for her cue. And all of a sudden, then she attacks. I felt like she should have went full bore, angry, aggressive, dark side energy, which she clearly seems to favor, and go to town attacking Soul, who just murdered her loved one.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really like, wait, what? And I really noticed it the second time. And in that same sequence, May sees Master Soul murder her mom. And that never is brought up. Like, did she get amnesia? Maybe when she falls off the bridge, she gets amnesia. If that happens, then there's nothing to complain about. There's nothing to scratch her head. But if she doesn't get amnesia and she remembers the whole thing, I mean, she does say, I don't remember what happened, and Soul restrains her in episode 6. But if she does remember, what the heck?
I don't think she remembers. I don't think
she must not.
No.
But do you agree with me about Coral?
Yeah, but what's interesting though is the stranger knows what happened. So the stranger has managed to get into May's head to see exactly what happened because why else did she go on that mission to kill the 4 of them?
But again, in episode 6, she asks Soul what happened, and Soul ties her up and says, "Hey, I'm going to tell you what happened, and you're going to listen." So she still doesn't know.
Yeah. So what's her motivation then for going after the 4 Jedi if she doesn't remember?
Because he told her to. Because that's how you can join. Yeah, that's how you can be my acolyte.
Stranger. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
But do you agree she should have gotten really more angry seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there was only 2 ways she could go: is either get really, really riled up and angry, or fall to her knees in pain.
Right, and neither happened.
Her partner's just been killed.
Yeah,
and she did neither.
No, I didn't. That I found that to be problematic.
And also, in a situation like that, God forbid something like that happened to me, the first thing I'd do is reach out to my children.
Of course you would.
So there wasn't that either. So there was 3 things that we think that she should have done. She did neither of those, or she did none of those.
It just seemed like a missed opportunity to really flesh out that character more. For me, what's the first one that you found was not something that you understood or felt relation to?
I'm just trying to think. There was a moment with the other mother when she spoke to the Jedi, and she says, this is after she's been attacked with a lightsaber by Soul, whether it was accidental or not, and she says, "I would have let you take her."
Mm-hmm.
And when I watched it the second time, I watched it with one of my boys, and he said there's no way she was going to let them take her. So why would she have said that?
Oh, I thought she was going to. When I watched episode 3, I totally got that impression.
Right.
I did, because she said, it's your choice, and they have this wonderful moment together, and she hugs her. "I will always love you, but this is what you want to do, then you go ahead." I believe
they were the future, but they were the future of the Coven.
Well, but you can still have a future, but come back. When your kids go to school, they leave and they come back.
I guess so.
So that's how I took it. But that kind of tells part of the gray, doesn't it? Of this.
Yeah. No, I guess so. Yeah. You mentioned one before about Stone being on fire.
Yeah.
But see, what I took from that, and I agree that the fire did appear to spread, but obviously in between the stone, you're going to have sand and muck and other bits. So that, for me, was what was igniting at that point.
Right.
And the fire didn't seem to spread that far.
There must have been something else that added to it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, not sure.
Oh, well, and let's talk about that scene. When we first saw it, it looked like May started a fire. And she holds up that weird thing that has the 2 glasses with the flame.
That was interesting.
Yeah. It was interesting. So I found it to be sort of a metaphorical representation of the anger in her spirit that her mother encourages her to do. Mother Coral.
Okay.
But when I watched this episode a couple times, she's holding it up. She's got the book, which looks like almost like a magic spell of how to start a fire.
Yeah.
And then it looks like she deliberately lights the book on fire. And then after she deliberately lights the book on fire, and I was paid careful attention to see if I was correct, then she looks surprised that paper is flammable. Yeah. And she dropped it, and she's like, "Oh no." So I thought, what? I didn't understand that at all.
No, I didn't understand that either.
What was the purpose of the book? Was she why was she looking into that fire? Was she just sort of mesmerized by it? She's clearly angry. But then she accidentally but deliberately lights paper on fire, and she's surprised. Wasn't that weird?
Yeah, no, it was very, very weird. I didn't get that at all.
That threw me.
Yeah. The other thing that really got me is that when their first visit, when the 4 of them go and visit the Coven for the first time, and the mother takes over Torben, which was done. I thought that was done absolutely brilliantly. I loved the way that she managed to get into his head and read his thoughts and get to know him a little bit. And then when he fell to his knees, obviously the others realized what was going on. But jump forward towards the end of the episode, it took 30 of them to get into the head of Kilnaka.
Right.
Now I appreciate that, the Wookiee mind is probably, a bit more fierce to get into.
And he's a full-fledged Jedi, and not a Padawan.
Yeah, I guess so. But it just it just didn't seem quite right. It took 30 of them to control him.
No, I get that.
Yeah, and it looked like they were singing in a choir. It didn't, I don't know. I just felt it took me out of it a little bit. Had they all been like huddled around and like holding each other, trying to that may have worked a bit more. But I just thought, are they going to burst into song like at the end of the episode when we got that music video? I thought maybe they were all going to do that together or something. It just
beatbox.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that too. And if this is a forced cult and they're a witch coven, then it just kind of fit. It kind of fit for what they were trying to do. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for everyone. But I didn't have much of a problem with that as I did the fact that they all appeared to just die.
Yes.
And if Indara could sense, usually the Jedi can sense when someone leaves the Force, when someone becomes one of the living Force. It's been talked about a lot in literature, in shows, and films, whatever. She doesn't pick up that 40 women die instantly, or if they don't die instantly, they're just knocked out, which it seems more like we're led to believe that they died. And she doesn't seem to react at all. So that leads me to Indara. Indara is just not a likable character. She's not. She's not particularly empathetic. And then the way she treats Soul several times and is sort of patronizing, there's kind of a forced bonding between the two.
I'm better than you. I mean, she says that at least a couple of times effectively.
Yeah. And then the fact that Soul, she's sort of taunting him that he can't have a Padawan. Like, that's not their decision. That's the council assigns people to have Padawans, assigns Jedi to have Padawans. So why wouldn't he have a Padawan unless they knew that he had some kind of a weird dark side? But the fact that he feels an affinity to Osha and he feels like he's meant to have her as a Padawan, the Force can do that. But it also seems a little bit like he's completely, the way that he discounts May, who's a living being, and the Jedi are supposed to protect all life. And the fact that he makes that choice, in Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire, there's a cool scene at the end where he can either save Mary Jane, or he can save that cable car full of people, and he ultimately decides to save them both. And he does. That's what a hero does. That's what Superman would do. My biggest problem with this entire episode, the biggest challenge I have, more than a problem, it's the biggest challenge I have, is that we don't have any Jedi that are really good. And the Jedi are supposed to be good.
Not amongst those four.
Not amongst those four. And this is the High Republic where the Jedi are supposed to be at their peak of goodness and, for light and life. There's no for light and life here. There's just for us. For our selfish needs or for our way to control and manipulate a situation. Not to mention the fact that they all like to lie, which again is part of the story. And I think it's a cool concept. I don't like it, but the fact that they're embracing it and they're doubling down on it that's cool. That's cool. If this was what Star Wars was always like, I wouldn't have gravitated towards it, because I feel like this is sort of ironic, because when George first created Star Wars, there were things like the Vietnam conflict and the Charles Bronson films with a lot of anti-heroes. So he wanted to create something that was clearly all good and clearly all evil. Luke is all in white, as is Leia. Vader is all in black, right? Yeah. So good versus evil. Absolutely. There's certainly evil here, but there's really not a lot of good. There's sort of shades of gray. And for Star Wars, I want Star Wars to be about hope and light. And that isn't there. And if this is a new direction after almost 50 years and they want to try something new, that's cool. But I prefer it to be the other way.
I don't buy that this is a new direction for the whole franchise. I just think this is the way that Leslie Headland's decided to tell her story, which is absolutely fine. I don't dislike it. I just like some of the way the story is being told.
Okay.
And the same old complaint that we've had with a lot of Star Wars, the script. And I just don't think that the story is as cohesive,
clunky
as I would have liked, because I think there was a better way potentially to tell this story that would have allowed us to have more empathy with most of the characters, actually.
one of the most persistent complaints about Star Wars is, hey, do you think it was legitimate the way Anakin fell to the dark side in Episode 3?
Mm-hmm.
That made more sense than much of the motivation in this episode of the series. Yeah. I still I still have a hard time connecting dots. And again, there are plenty of conventional ways to tell a story. They don't have to be that way. It doesn't need to be that way. I very much applaud trying to take things in a new direction. But I still find it to be challenging. And that being said, and I think you will probably agree with this, James. I can't speak for you, but tell me what you think. Even though I find it awkward and cumbersome and very bumpy, I still can't help but be excited to see what's going to happen next. I don't have any thoughts that it's going to redeem itself for me in some ways, but I'm not going to look back on it. And we'll follow back on this after we see the final episode of the season. I don't think I'm going to look back on it with a bitter taste in my mouth. More kind of like, well, that didn't work for me. But, and I think I hope I will be able to frame it like that.
Look, there's characters within the show that I want to know more about.
Which ones?
There's the stranger for sure.
That's the only one I'm interested in now, by the way. I wish I could say something different, but
Jackie, I'm interested in Jackie and maybe Yord. I don't know, but definitely the stranger. Maybe Soul.
I've never been an anti-hero guy, and he's not an anti-hero. He's kind of a new hybrid, which I applaud. We can put this in the sugary side. I kind of applaud that he has what he thinks are good intentions, but again, the road to evil is paved with good intentions. And the fact that he goes on with this lie makes him hard to root for. He's not a Jedi. Like if the Jedi were real, I wouldn't say to my children, hey, I want you to be like Master Soul. No, he'd be like, I want you to be like Obi-Wan Kenobi or Yoda.
Yeah.
So Soul isn't like that. Does he have to be like that? No, but I still think it would be nice to have at least one character that is squeaky clean. Mm-hmm. And the only one that was maybe like that was Jackie, and they unceremoniously killed her. Yeah.
Maybe that's why I've got an affinity for her. But I think the other thing is that I do want to know what happens to Osha, because obviously Osha now is trapped with the stranger.
Mm-hmm.
She
didn't seem to mind.
No, but then she is being manipulated in the same way that May was manipulated by him. So it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. I don't think that all of this can be resolved in one more episode.
I don't either.
I think there's more of a story to tell here. I don't know whether there'll be an opportunity to do a series 2. The numbers haven't been as bad as some people were making out. I wouldn't not watch a series 2.
No, we do it, but let's be honest. We have a choice. I mean, we love Star Wars. We run some pretty popular podcasts and websites in the world of fandom. So of course we're going to watch it. Here's the question: Would if this was how Star Wars was from the very beginning, would you be as invested in this saga?
No, because it's not as you said a few times, and I completely agree. It's not the story of hope that originally attracted me to this. Because the way I always explain when I do talks at schools and things, why Star Wars? Because it's the ultimate story of good versus evil with good winning.
Yep.
And I always say that if you look at the life that we live in, which is so imperfect in so many ways, when you escape to the world of Star Wars, hope prevails.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see a lot of that right now.
No, and I think that's ultimately why I struggle.
Yeah. And I get that. I completely get that, because even in the darkest days of the prequels, there was hope. There was always hope there.
Yep.
Even if there was, a tiny little glimmer of hope, it was there. The same to an extent with the sequels as well. And if you look at all of the Disney Plus shows that we've had over the last few years, the majority of them have had that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree.
I still don't. I think there's worse Disney Plus Star Wars shows than this, though.
Yeah,
I'm probably going to be lambasted for that, but hey.
I know. I'm gonna kind of think about that. I don't know. it's already going to come out. Hey, where do you rank this? I've already seen. I tend to, as just to be as a critic, as a pseudo professional critic.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone says something is the best or something is the worst, I'm more reticent to kind of buy into that, because I think we as a culture, we're very much prisoners of the moment.
Yeah, that's
to really know something's the best or the worst, I think that takes time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that takes time. But again, that's just me. It's not like my way's the right way.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
So anything you want to say about this episode before we give our letter grade?
The word I choose was finally, because we finally understand what's going on. And it's taken us, like 90% of the series to get to this point, which I think is a shame, because I think we may have felt differently about things had we have known exactly what was going on and why. And I might actually go back and do what we've said and actually watch the episodes in a different order before next week, just to see how it flows.
You have to let me know.
Yeah, I think it'll certainly be interesting to see it like that. And if I ever get a chance to ask Leslie, I'll ask her that. Why didn't you think, or did you ever conceive it this way?
That would be a cool question to ask her. Well, I'm sure you'll get that chance. You're a pretty important guy.
Well, likewise. So I think that's where I am. Look, I'm intrigued to see how it ends. I don't think we're going to get all the answers that we want or expect, and I hope that if it doesn't get a second season, they find a way that they can tie it all together, albeit in a book or a comic or something.
As long as I'm looking forward to see what happens too, because I'm curious.
Yeah.
But as long as it's told in the context of the rules they've given to us, which have been a little uneven, I don't know. But I'm certainly looking forward to talking about it with you. Why don't you go ahead and give me your letter grade for choice? What is your choice for the letter grade?
I'm going to give it a C.
Okay.
There were bits that I liked. There were bits that I didn't. It wasn't, the best episode that we've had. I didn't dislike it, but I think it's a C grade. There's room for improvement.
Okay. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm going to give it a B-.
Wow.
A very, very low B- because...
So we're close.
We are very close. After it was over, I was scratching my head, but I found myself thinking more about the things that I enjoyed more than the things that I didn't agree with narratively. And I haven't felt that way about any of the episodes.
Okay.
So it was nice to have a break from that. I think it's going to be it's worth the wait to see what's going to happen. And I look forward to talking about it with you.
Absolutely.
James, thank you so much. Thanks you so much, James, as always, for joining me to talk about the Acolyte here on Coffee with Kenobi. Again, I of course think the world of you, love your friendship and your insights into this saga. And I highly encourage people, and I've said this so many times, and this is true. I go to Jedi News before I go to StarWars.com because I know I'm going to get so much information from so many aspects of Star Wars. And thank you for continuing to foster that love.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for everything that you do as well. The community is definitely a richer place having you in it.
Oh, that's very sweet of you. That's very sweet of you. Where can people find Jedi News?
So Jedi News is at JediNews.com, and you can find us on social media. Just search for Jedi News Network.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.